what happened in the Niger Delta and what happened in what is happening with the Boko Haram. As far as international law is concerned, strictly based on international law, what happened in the Niger Delta was an internal law enforcement operation. As such, when you are comparing it with Boko Haram, which is a recognized non-international armed conflict in which the International Criminal Court has agreed that grave violations of law of armed conflict, grave violations against the ICC Rome Statute have been committed. So, honest, I will differ.
On what part, beg your pardon?
Okay. As far as the ICC is concerned, they have identified 11 cases of grave violations of international humanitarian law, which they say 8 were committed by Boko Haram and 3 by Nigerian security forces. So, in that aspect, as far as I'm concerned, when you look at the amnesty in the Niger Delta, it's not the same amnesty we are talking about in the Boko Haram insurgency. But that is not to say that amnesty also in the Boko Haram case cannot be looked at. But I just want to lay the fact that as far as international law is concerned, what happened in the Niger Delta should not just be strictly equated. I don't want to look at it like Niger Delta were given amnesty, give Boko Haram amnesty.
No, nobody is making an assumption that the details of the amnesty programs will be the same. Certainly, there are 2 different situations and require 2 different solutions. But the question is, given the gravity of the crimes between the 2 situations, can we now apply that notion, the concept of amnesty, which is essentially saying, look, if you lay down your arms, we can essentially reorientate you and bring you back into ordinary functioning society? Do you think that that is something that can be done with Boko Haram militants, given the heft of their crimes?
Definitely something can be done. And we have to look at what happened in other countries. If you look at Tamil Tigers, if you look at Colombian counterinsurgency, if you look at Algeria, if you look at Lord Resistance Army in Uganda, what we are learning from studying these counterinsurgencies and how they are ended, almost all this one I mentioned, they ended with an amnesty. The latest one being the one in Colombia, which we like to draw attention from. So amnesty, what is amnesty? Amnesty is a legal, it's a juridical tool by which a state may wish to expunge or forget completely certain criminal acts as far as prosecution is concerned. Now, the level of amnesty, the only difference is that international law allows states to use their discretion in deciding whether amnesty should be used to end conflict. And I have mentioned this 5 or 6 examples. Even the IRA, the UK IRA problem ended up with the Good Friday Agreement, which basically was an amnesty. So honest to close and say no amnesty because they have committed violations of crime, that is not the way to go. However, there is a middle way. What international law, what global best practice suggests is that the amnesty should not be blanket. Even among the Boko Haram, there is level of involvement. We are aware, of course, that there are some people who were pressed into Boko Haram, who were caught as hostages and pressed into Boko Haram. There are children. It wouldn't make sense to say that those ones are going to face legal implications if you give amnesty to those ones and the lower members of Boko Haram. I think that is okay, and that's how to go. But for the higher level members of Boko Haram, for those that have caused what is called grave breaches of international law of armed conflict, for those that have committed heinous war crimes, crimes against humanity, like abduction, those ones will have to face legal consequences.
People have asked, how do you think the people who have been affected by the war waged by Boko Haram, how would they come to how would they accept that amnesty is being granted to this group of terrorists?
A very interesting question. In 2016 or 2017, I happened to be at the Swiss embassy, where there's the Center for Democracy, organized an event where leaders from both Athens state representatives from Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa, and the religious leaders and traditional rulers were called. The question was, it was the issue with the government's safe corridor operation, which is you drop your arm, you receive some training, you are released. It is interesting to know that when the question was put, are those communities ready to accept repentant Boko Harams who have been pardoned? Honest, the majority of the answers from those people is that they are not ready to accept that amnesty, which raises the question, how did some other countries do it? Colombia, which I like to quote, because we have similarities to what happened in Colombia and what is happening in Nigeria, which ended 2017. The people were put through a referendum. Do you want amnesty or not? With a small majority, the people who didn't want the referendum carried the day. However, the new president, on being elected, he consulted and found that, look, without amnesty, there is no way you can have an end to this something that has cost 50 years. So he went ahead through the National Assembly and got a law which allowed him to put the amnesty which has been in place now. Now, why amnesty, gentlemen? Non-international armed conflict is more problematic than international armed conflict. International conflict, country A versus country B. Once we finish the war, you go to your country, I go to my country. In non-international armed conflict, it is not like that. You are taking of people who are citizens, who are going to remain, who are Boko Haram members themselves, who have wives that may not be Boko Harams, who have children that may not be Boko Harams, who have in-laws that may not be Boko Harams. So for lasting peace, there's really no need to where you can say Boko Haram go, non-Boko Haram stay. So it is for this issue that even international law agrees that in non-international armed conflict like this one, you could look at the aspect of amnesty. But like I said, those that have committed heinous crimes is not a blanket amnesty. That is why I slightly disagree with the government. It should be an unconditional amnesty. Amnesty is conditional. We saw it in Algeria. We saw it in most of the countries that I call that use amnesty. There are indices to decide what is your level of involvement. Somebody that strapped a suicide bomb on a girl, if he survived, I don't think that person should benefit from amnesty.
Well, Group Captain Sadiq, retired Group Captain Sadiq Show, we have to thank you most kindly for coming on Sunrise Daily. He is, let me see if I can quickly get his designation now. He is the security consultant and adjunct professor at the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies in Germany. Sunrise Daily will continue about now with my colleagues in Lagos.